Greetings, one and all. Welcome back to another episode of ATP, Ask the Pastor. Today, someone writes in, Grace and peace, Pastor. I am currently a seminary student at Liberty University School of Divinity and viewed your YouTube video regarding ordination by the Universal Life Church. The Universal Life Church is now ordaining thousands and thousands of people who are donning ministerial vestments and officiating at weddings, probably hundreds of thousands of them annually now. The ULC now also claims to have their own seminary, claiming they can officiate at all weddings regardless of the religion. Are any real seminaries doing anything to prevent or counter this? I personally can't imagine claiming I'm ordained by paying $10 to a website. Technically, the ordination from the Universal Life Church is free. The $10 is about what it costs to get the certificate and to get the certificate mailed to you via the U.S. Postal Service. And you would not believe how many emails I've received about the ULC over the years. Most of them from happy customers of the ULC who don't care for what I've said about the organization in the past. But let's get to your question here. There are two keys, I think, to understanding this entire phenomenon of free online ordination and the ULC. And the first key to a proper understanding is to understand precisely what the ULC confers upon people. And that is ordination in strictly the legal sense. The state regulates marriage, and so it's up to the state to decide who can legally solemnize marriages. And with a few exceptions, state laws are remarkably similar. And so generally, states give the authority to solemnize marriages to ordained clergy and to public servants. Specifically justices of the peace. Some states cast that net a bit wider and include other judges and magistrates. A few states require clergy to be licensed with the state, but one of the oddest that I found was the state of Colorado. Couples can solemnize their own marriage themselves as long as they have the appropriate paperwork from the county courthouse. But the point is, the vast majority of states require, or rather limit, the officiating of marriages to public servants and to ordained clergy. Now here's then when things get fun, because no state defines then what it means to be ordained, nor does any state enumerate any sort of requirements in order to be ordained. And to do so, I think, would clearly violate the First Amendment of the Constitution. And ultimately, it's a good thing that the government isn't involved in the ordination business at any level. God has given the right to elect and ordain ministers to Christian congregations, not to Caesar. When it comes down to it, we just simply don't want the state, whether state government or federal government, involved in regulating ordinations in our church in any way, shape, or form. So the state requires that officiants be ordained clergy, but they don't regulate how they can get that status. They just care that the officiant of the wedding has that status. Now, churches like the Universal Life Church then help people get that legal status. These folks who seek ordination through the ULC, through their website, they're ordained in the legal sense, but not in the scriptural sense. And that's because, as we've said before, the ULC isn't a Christian church. It's a syncretistic church by its own confession. Syncretism is the belief that all religions are equally valid, even though they contradict one another. And so, for instance, you don't have to take my word for it. We can look at some ULC websites. One ULC website confesses, quote, "We hold no deity, or deities, over another. In our view, all belief systems are equally valuable. Furthermore, as a member of the ULC, there are no loyalty tests or rings to kiss." End quote. Several ULC websites will use the phrase, "We are all children of the same universe," over which they then stamp in a row 13 different religious symbols that we are all children of the same universe. The original ULC headquarters website declares that, quote, "The Universal Life Church has no traditional doctrine. We as an organization believe in that which is right. Each individual has the privilege and responsibility to determine what is right for themselves, as long as it does not infringe upon the rights of others." Now, those creedal statements, and they are creedal statements, make no bones about that, those statements contradict what Christ clearly says about himself in the Gospels and what his apostles say then in the apostolic writings. Jesus says of himself in John 16:6, "No one comes to the Father except through me." St. Peter reiterates that point in Acts 4, verse 12, when he says, nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given men by which we must be saved. Now, based on these creedal statements of the ULC, it's clear that the ULC rejects this. Now, I understand that this doesn't necessarily mean that individual ministers ordained by the ULC are all syncretistic universalists who deny Christ and his gospel, but this begs the question, why would a faithful Christian seek ordination from a false teaching church? And to be frank, the ULC is simply an online ordination mill. And while it may grant, it may be a church according to the legal definition, and while it may offer the legal status of ordination, it's not a church in the scriptural definition because it rejects Christ and his gospel as the sole means of salvation for sinful humanity. That's the first key to understanding this. Again, precisely what it confers, it only confers a legal status upon its applicants. Now, the second key to understanding all of this phenomenon of online ordination and the ULC, is that all of this appeals to the worst parts of the sinful flesh. The sinful nature doesn't want to be bound by God's order that he sets forth in Holy Scriptures. And the Scriptures teach that only men whom Christ has called into the ministry should be ordained. Now, that call doesn't happen immediately anymore, meaning without means, meaning God doesn't speak directly to someone audibly, whether in their ears or in their hearts, as he did the prophets and the apostles then. Rather now, and we see this even in the New Testament, Christ calls men through his church. His church is his body, and so Christ is still doing this calling. Now, he does lay on men's hearts the desire to serve him and the desire to offer themselves and to learn so that they can serve. But that desire to serve as a pastor isn't the divine call. Call only happens through the church. Now, historically and scripturally then, ordination also then doesn't happen apart from the divine call, because all ordination is a solemn and public attestation of the divine call then. It's the public putting the man into the office to which he has already been called. St. Paul adds that men who desire to be ministers are to be able to teach in 1 Timothy 3, verse 2. And that's why the church has historically required theological education before call on ordination. Simply put, you're just not able to teach what you haven't learned yourself. And before somebody starts barking about the apostles being, fishermen and tax collectors, remember, they had almost 4 years of instruction with Jesus himself. So, with all this, I guess the point we're trying to make here is the ULC and this whole phenomenon of online ordination, it embraces the sinful nature's belief that anyone, male or female, can be called into the ministry by a call in their heart by whatever being or God they think, that they believe in, and that nothing, not education, not sex, nor specific belief should hold them back from exercising that inner heartfelt call. And so in this way, the ULC connects ordination and call quite well. It's just that they define both of those very differently than the Scriptures do. But again, this really shouldn't surprise anyone based on the fact that the ULC is a universalistic sect that has no official doctrine except their creed, do only that which is right, and every individual is free to practice their religion however they like. Again, creedal statements. Now, as our culture slides further into secularism and into paganism, I think this sort of thing is only going to get worse. It's going to become all the more popular. You're going to see more and more of this sort of thing popping up. And again, because it combines the worst elements of our sinful nature, the desire to believe that God speaks directly to us apart from Christ and apart from his word, the desire to play church without a church, the desire to play pastor without an actual call from Christ, without actual ordination, and without actual knowledge of the true God. Your initial question in all this was, is there anything that the true church can do to curtail this sort of thing? And the answer is not really. Since we live in the world, we simply just have to accept the world's mockery of the good gifts of God and its imitation of the gifts that God gives. One of those gifts being pastors and teachers in the office of the holy ministry. The only thing that we can do is simply confess the truth of the gospel, Christ's church and his ministry, and other than that, we just simply have to let these folks alone and let the Lord deal with them. And he has promised that he will do so on the last day when he returns again. So, thanks for the question. We'll see you next time on ATP.